welcome Mayor Sean O'Harrigan here, who will now deliver an address.
I'm not quite as tall as Declan, so I'm a little bit hidden behind this, but this is a little bit like having to speak after an episode at one of the nights of the Cat Laughs, followed by one of the best singers from the Eurovision, and talk about a family of talent and good looks, and the talent is your bit, Declan. Áthas an dán am bhein sá mar bhéar Kilcunnig ceannas a dtíine go bhfuil sé de an órdorm tacht I gcomharba Peter Dlugacraí mar bhéar in na carach. Tá sé comá mar phléisiúr a bheith I meas cárde, mar cé gur blóin den Scoil Mise tá aithne orm Muintir Dlugacra le fada agus tuisc sin is phléisiúr le a bheith an seo. Unfortunately, one of the things that happened in the rush this morning was that a wonderful piece of paper which Pádraigín Dlugacra, or Pat Dlugacraí, gave me a couple of weeks ago got lost, and it was a wonderful account of the night in which Peter Dlugacraí returned to Kilkenny to take up the mayoralty to which he had been elected in his absence due to his imprisonment, or due to I think not being present. Agus ceann den rudí a dúirt sé ná go raibh áthas go raibh sé ná labhairt in Gaeilge le muintir na carach seo, agus go raibh súlaige go mbeadh Gaeilge ar a háil ag gceathmhéara a thiocadh gníomh agus I gceachtaine a raibh ann chun éisteachtlóthe. I'm in the presence of a number of former mayors of Kilkenny, which is always a daunting prospect. But Peter Dlugacraí's wish that night when he finally came back to stand as mayor of Kilkenny in the council chambers and to wear the chain on what was a huge night of achievement for him. In his speech he was delighted to speak as Gaeilge agus as Béarla, and he expressed the hope that every mayor who followed him would equally be proficient in Gaeilge and equally would have an audience who would understand him equally. That hope maybe hasn't been fully achieved. But I know that former mayors, I saw Kieran Crotty and in particular Tony Patterson when I was coming in, many of the mayors have fulfilled that wish and have been able to speak as Gaeilge agus as Béarla equally fluently in the chamber. And as I said, one of the greatest things that gives me pleasure today is to be here as one of the successors of Peter Dlugacraí as mayor of Kilkenny. And I suppose in particular for a blow-in, as I said, all the way from Kerry, that's a particular pleasure. And I suppose there are some other ironies. I do wear the chain, which was donated or presented to Kilkenny Corporation in 1952 by that sometimes friend and sometimes foe of Peter Dlugacraí, Eamon de Valera, and it's the chain that has been worn by each mayor since then, and the names of the mayors are added each year. Unfortunately, and it's something I made inquiries about in the last number of weeks, there was an older chain which was worn by Peter Dlugacraí as mayor, and those of you who go into the town hall will see that most of the mayors until 1950 wear that old chain. I did try to look for it this morning, but I wasn't able to track it down. But it's something that hopefully before this year is out, it would be a pleasure to have the opportunity to wear that chain as well. Looking at some of the, particularly I was on a walking tour this morning and we passed Airfield, and we tried to describe all of the Crotties who had worn the chain and all of the Fitzgeralds and the relations. I'd be 5 or 6 generations before I'd be in a position to say that any of my antecedents could achieve those kind of honours. But could I just say that the biggest reason that I take pleasure in being here is because as long as I've known anybody from Kilkenny, I've known a member of the Dlugacraí family, because my aunt, I'm not sure if she's here today or not, Edith Crowley, used to bring people from Kilkenny to Kerry on a regular basis. And one of the first of those was Sheila Brennan, somebody who I know she was friendly with for all of her life, so I'm delighted that Sheila is here. And then I had the good fortune, like many of us in the room have, of meeting a Kilkenny woman and being really introduced to the important things in this city, and eventually finding myself living here, and amongst my in-laws who sent me a text this morning from the Sunshine to say, please make sure you buy us a copy of the book, and Anne and JJ Doherty, neighbours from Parliament Street of the Lucrease, who I know would love to be here, and they have been firm friends with the guests of honour, I think you described them, Declan, Peter and Sheila, for many a long year, and they have been of great support to them also in many ways. This is a fascinating book. I'm sorry I haven't had it in my hands over the last couple of weeks, because I've been reading the bits about Peter's election as mayor, and it just reminds us that however difficult the times we live in times that are certainly considerably less difficult than the incredible years in which Peter Delucre made his vital contribution to the development of Kilkenny City, and indeed to the development of Irish life. I was walking, as I said this morning, with people of mixed political background, some of whom said that Peter Delucre deserves to be canonised as a saint for having got those people out of Lincoln jail, and some who mightn't be of the same political persuasion who had a slightly different opinion as to the gift that Peter Delucre should have got for releasing some of the people involved. We now live in times when much of the fraught atmosphere of that period is thankfully behind us, when many of the raw divisions that existed in the period between 1912 in particular and 1925-26, and indeed on into the 30s and afterwards, are beginning to reduce, and when the real raw harshness of that time is beginning to dissipate. It may never dissipate fully, and that is what makes, I think, the political life of every country. We are also here, as I said, at another event earlier in the year, when the great book produced on the lost, the fallen of the First World War in Kilkenny was released. We're at the beginning of an incredible decade of commemorations, a decade which presents us with huge challenges. The weekend before last, the loyalist population of the 6 counties celebrated or commemorated the events of September 1912, when the Ulster Covenant was signed. It would have been unheard of for us 20 years ago to be allowed to join in that commemoration in any way, yet I believe that we must. That doesn't lessen my nationalism or my republicanism in any way to remember the events that happened in that astonishing decade from 1912 to 1922. And again, we come back to the local, how central the local characters in this story were in Kilkenny. And also I come back to my role as a teacher. And here I'll say something that I have said in person to the man involved in the decision, and that's Rory Quinn as Minister for Education. I really hope that he doesn't go ahead with at least the suggestions that are there at the moment, that history and geography, but history in particular, wouldn't remain as a compulsory subject to junior cert level, because I really feel very strongly as a teacher that our history must be a compulsory part of our learning, certainly until our children reach the age of 15 or 16, because without understanding where we've come from, it's very different to plan. It's very difficult to plan where we're going. And in that context, one of the things I discovered in 2006 when I was still a class teacher was that it's very important to localise the history. And luckily that has been recognised in the curriculum in the last number of years. Because one of the things I got, and he's a man that Declan mentions many times during this book, another of my sister-in-laws is married to Tom Tracy, who was the grandson of Tom Tracy, who was the commander of the Volunteers during the Rising in 1916. And his military archive papers I brought into a 6th class group and used them as the way that we learned about the Rising and what it meant in Kilkenny. Realised that in Kittler's Inn on the Saturday night of the Easter weekend that the Volunteers met, received the countermanding order which had been delivered from Dublin, and all that came about from those events. And also discovered that somebody that Eileen and David and a number of others have worked with in RTE, Olivia O'Leary, that her grandfather Dr. Dundon of Burris was the man in whose house the arms were stored which would be used in the Rising in 1916 in Kilkenny. And all of those connections mean things to people, to their grandchildren, their children, and to us as a community. And I think that's the importance of Peter DeLucre's story. And could I also say, as Mayor, as I have met groups and brought groups through the city, and that's one of the great privileges of this job, there is nothing like a story that grabs the imagination. And thanks to the Michael Collins movie, this is a story that has caught the imagination of the nation, and indeed of anybody who has any interest in the development of the Irish nation, because a story of a key being moulded in wax, the wax being taken out of Lincoln Jail, being brought to Kilkenny and the key being made, is a story that means something to every child, to every adult, and to everybody who has a passion or doesn't have a passion for history. And I suppose finally, you know, we're just so lucky in Kilkenny. Every time you walk into Roth House and you pick up the incredible store of books there are in relation to the history of Kilkenny, and as I say, if I keep buying them, I'm becoming closer and closer to divorce as the size of the library becomes bigger. And if we could just get time to read them all, it would be fantastic. But every time that another tome is added to the history of this city, our history and our city becomes a richer and a wealthier place as a result, and allows us to look back at the great fortitude and at the great luck that we have, that people like Declan are happy to take time out of their lives and sit down and research and write, because without that happening, then we can't have the understanding that we should have. So we owe you a debt of gratitude, Declan. We owe a debt of gratitude to Mercer and to all of the family members that Declan has mentioned. I would hope that very soon in the life of Kilkenny we will have something that we need very badly, which is an adequate county and city museum. Most of you who are living locally know that we are hoping that St. Mary's Church in the city centre will be that building, because our charters, our sword and mace, which were delivered to the house in Parliament Street on the night that Peter DeLucre returned, that sword and mace, which will accompany me tomorrow at a civic function, and which date back to 1609. Those are incredible parts of our history. They deserve an adequate home, and perhaps in that adequate home the key will join them, and that's something that we would all love to see, I think, because it is such a central part of the history of this city and the history of this city. I wish this book every luck. I hope it sells well, and I hope that you plague Liz and the other book sellers in Kilkenny City to buy it, and that you encourage your friends to buy it, because without book sales, people don't sit down and take the time out in their lives to do what Declan has done. So, Gomara and Laura Shaw, the Gahamid Fade, obviously Kunal Day, Right Shaw and Arkamert, Ahas and Down on the Van Shaw, Gurmeen Mahlif.
Poetry was important to Peter and me. Here to read the first three stanzas of the poem A Creed to Live By, composed by Nancy Sims, is my grandmother, Sheila DeLocke.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I start and read these three stanzas that Declan had chosen for me, because we felt that it actually had quite a bearing on the way Peter led his life, I would really like to thank Declan for the lovely gesture he has awarded Peter and I here today. It was most unexpected, but I've never been a guest of honour before, and I probably won't be again, so yay! A Creed for Life by Nancy Sims. Do not undermine your worth by comparing yourself with others. It is because we are different that each of us is special. Do not set your goals by what other people deem important. Only know what is best for you. Do not take for granted the things closest to your heart. Cling to them as you would to life. For without them, life is meaningless. Do not let your life slip through your fingers by living in the past, nor for the future. By living your life one day at a time, you live all the days of your life. Do not give up when you still have something to give. Nothing is really over until the moment you stop trying. It is a fragile thread that binds us to each other. Thank you.